for true change, the kind of change that can make our people to live equally as humans, with dignity, with human respect, which, of course, since the beginning of the country called Nigeria, has been lacking. And we've had a series of elections, and here we are today. We are at this juncture where some people would rather have us go back to the ballots and do what we have always done. Change the driver of a faulty vehicle. We do this every 4 years, and nothing changes. So why are not changing? Is it because we have bad drivers? Are the drivers the problem that we tend to change every now and then? Or there is need for total overhauling of this machine? What is that solution to this plethora of challenges, of issues that Nigeria as a nation is being plagued with? These are many more are the issues that we're going to be raising today, and we're going to be speaking from the standpoint of Yoruba nationalists. Practical solutions are the things that we're going to be putting up on the basis of how countries are formed globally. How are countries formed? How do we have nations spring up? Has Nigeria, as a country, really gone through that process of nationhood? Yes or no? And your inputs and insights are also welcome as part of this conversation. We want to also hear from you. But today, I have co-hosting with me my dear brother, Dr. Sanwo Diegwono. And we also have Balok as part of the team, Omoyagba. And feel free to send your request. Omolisa B, I see you too. Thank you for tuning in. KOIKIMEDIA, thank you once again. Thank you for being part of this program today. Soft, Anoluwa, Emeka, Abiola, Mogaji, KOG. Thank you all for joining. Dr. Jacob, Robert, we really appreciate you. Sheyekun, thank you for tuning in today. Feel free to send in your requests to be a speaker if you've got any contributions or comments to make. But before we get started, I'm going to call on Balogun Omoyagba to play Yoruba National Anthem, and after that, we can get started. But before I do that, just to do a quick mic check, Mr. Diegwono, Dr. Sanwo, can you just speak? Let's know that you've got your speaker, your microphone under control.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you can hear me clearly. Thank you so much for coming to this program today. It promises to be an intellectual discourse, an opportunity for us to rub minds, for us to challenge the mentality or the ideologies that surround the superiority of elections over referendum or constitutional reform, or the constitutional reform argument over elections. It is devoid of ethnic sentiments. We are not politicians or political actors, as the case may be. And this conversation is not sponsored by political actors. It's just for us to speak as nationalists in the ethnic nations or ethnic indigenes or ethnic nationalities that are currently in the present day Nigeria. So as a Yoruba nationalist, I'm very proud to welcome you to this forum, to this Twitter space, this discourse. And it's my hope at the very minimum, at the end of today's session, we'll be able to, challenge all those ideologies around the complications for having constitutional reform, or why are we even talking about this when we should be talking about elections, and why, maybe people have different opinions on what we should really be talking about, and why a lot of people also have limited expectations from changing of drivers or elections, as the case may be. So I want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Retweet the page, tweet the page, put it on your WhatsApp, pinging your friends. This is, there is no ethnic bashing. Everybody is welcome to this program, even though it is being sponsored by Yoruba Nation. Non-Yoruba nationalists are also welcome. So long as you're proud of your identity, you are welcome. And of course, if you have identity crisis as well, we'll seek to address that on a lighter note. So thank you so much for coming, and feel free to ping in your friends as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, my brother Dapo Sonwo. It's an honor to have had the opportunity to work with you. I've learned a lot from you, and I continue to learn from you, dear brother. Once again, usually we do broadcast on Yoruba Nation platform on Clubhouse, but seeing the importance of Twitter engagement, we're also trying to host this kind of sessions on Twitter Spaces where we can connect and engage with our brothers and sisters and share ideas on the nation, or on the state of the nation, Nigeria, and the way forward for the Yoruba people. That is essentially what we do. And once again, thank you for joining us. We are going to get started. And my dear brother Balogun will be playing Yoruba National Anthem for us. Balogun, please. Thank you. Thank you very much, Balogun Omo Yagba. So that is Yoruba National Anthem there. And once again, you're welcome to this Twitter Spaces. We're going to be exploring the Nigerian electoral system as being a circus show, a distraction, and a sham. Mr. D, in your opinion, what do you think is wrong? And why do you think the electoral system of Nigeria is a distraction from the main issues that we should be focusing on? Mr. Dapo.
Thank you very much. So one of the interesting things that has always surprised me from historical account about who we are as a people, as ethnic nations, about economic studies into our best years, our best GDP growth years, our best policy-wise, regional-wise. I mean, the very things that makes us proud, about who we are. When you explore it and you start to ask yourself some profound questions about why Nigeria isn't working, you usually come to, it usually all leads to the same thing. But more often than not, in examining our problems, sometimes we get distracted by certain factors in our problems, and then we quickly hurry back to situate our problems as what we call a leadership problem. And so we get carried away by messiahs and strong, willing personalities that we feel have the best interest of everybody, irrespective of whichever nationality they are. And as a result, we get carried away by such personalities to effect real change. Now, what usually happens is that we have short bursts of success or economic success, and then we have periods of recession throughout our history. If you look back at the very foundation of the country between the 50s and the 60s, you can almost say that we had periods of burst of success economic-wise. We're growing as a Black nation. And then we've slumped around the 60s, early 70s. We went into a depression. It continued up until the 1999 period, and we seem to face a trajectory that we wanted to have certain things done. So we created economic blueprints, work plans, and we started to move again in a certain direction. And we experienced almost 10 years of consistent economic performance. In fact, there was a time, I remember when I was still writing my first degree in economics, they used to refer to Nigeria as one of those BRIC countries that, at the time had the opportunities or the potentials to join the likes of Indonesia, Brazil, Russia, India, and all that, Singapore, to become great countries. But then again, we seem to nosedive into, when I was still writing, a new set of periods where today some of those countries have sometimes as much as 2 times our GDP, with even half our population. So, and the GDP per capita between these countries are indicators that Nigeria is not a very successful nation. So, in the middle of this discourse, I think the popular say is that we should try and ask ourselves if, doing the same thing over and over again with a viewpoint of getting a different result is actually the smart way to go. So the question now is, do we have a leadership problem, or is the structure not visible to achieve long-term economic prosperity for our people, at least at the very foundation of all our wants, our basic needs as human beings, or as Yoruba people, as Igbo people, as nationalists, Ijo, Ishekiri, Birom, Anga, Chief, Lupe. We all want economic success and prosperity for our people. We want security. We want progress. We want to be respected as Black people. We want to industrialize. We want to have institutions that work, infrastructure, and all that. So, of course, all of these, wants and needs, we channel it in through economic or government blocks, right? How we want to be governed. And then it further dovetails into the results that we see that, happens in our day-to-day. So the question thereof is, why are we failing? Why is it that we have, so many people living in poverty or living in less than $1 a day? Why do you have as much as 23 million people unemployed? Why do you have the largest concentration of out-of-school children, even in Africa? Why do you have, single-digit economic growth for a giant and massive nation like Nigeria? Why do you struggle after 60 years of independence with less than 4,200, 300 megawatts of electricity to generate? So these questions are pertinent to our makeup as a people. And that is why we decided to explore the submission that are elections actually the solution to our problem, or is it a distraction? Does it actually mean that all these leaders over the years, they actually are terrible leaders, and this is the collective, summation of their brain capacity, or this is exactly who we are as Black people? We cannot do better than this, or are we just all struggling, being distracted? I think that's the word, distracted by things that don't matter, but instead of having conversations about things that matter. So in this discourse today, it is my expectation that we would look at the problem from that regard, and then we will try and, as a people, just as a collective, just examine what are our real problems in Nigeria. Why is it not working? Why do we go forward and backward and forward and backward? Why do we call the class of 1970 generals the clueless, the failed leadership? Why do we keep getting repatriated funds stolen by former war generals? Why is it that, one classic question, and I'm going to stop my submission after this for us to consider this part as a synopsis, as an opener, just to prepare us for what we're going to be doing in the next round. Why is it that in the very foundation of the way Nigeria is structured, ask yourself this question. In the national anthem, it says, "And the labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain." Now, recently, $23 million was signed by the US government to repatriate back to Nigeria. It was stolen and looted by somebody that a Yoruba person like myself considers a criminal, a war general, a dictator that terrorized and killed and assassinated the best of us. Somebody under whose purview MK Abiola was murdered. Why is it that, to me, that person is a villain in my story? When my children, Yoruba children, when I tell them about Nigeria, I tell them about the evil general called Sonny Abacha that ruled Nigeria with an iron fist and killed our best brains and all the elections and sent us into a state of economic decay and chaos. And beyond all that, looted close to, I think we're almost at $400 million that we've received out of almost $2 billion that he stole. The question there is, how can such a person be a villain in my own story in the same Nigeria, but to somebody else in a different part of the country, that person is an hero? Like, he is a hero. He is worshipped, he is adored, he has streets paved after him. I was watching one of our past football matches, and in the same country, they named the stadium after him, airports after him. So the question is, how can me as a person consider that person, a villain, and somebody else looks at that person and worships him and adores him as hero? But we are both the same people. Clearly, we are not. So this and many more are the things that we don't unpack carefully when we rush for leadership. Another funny case is in the political scene, and we'll be making references to that as we go across the lecture. There's a clip that went viral some days ago. It was all over social media, and it was a taunt by the current governor of, I think, Sokoto State, Tambuwal, where he was responding to a previous popular saying that has polarized social media by the candidate of the All Progressive Congress, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And he had the Buhari Shekan Olule, Oshekeji Olule. So the Olule part of it means he failed. So they were referring to Wike, and they said Wike Olule, which means Wike failed. And what did he fail to do? He failed to bring Tambuwal, who he had since back for the better part of 4 years financially, and to reverse, to support him at the PDP electoral elections. And so that, yes, Wike considered it a betrayal. But I don't see it as a betrayal that a Northerner is supporting a Northerner, because that is how they've always been. That is what history tells us. That is what history justifies us by. And so therefore, I find it curious that somebody would say that, and you feel, oh, these people they didn't do what they promised to do. And the truth of the matter is that at no point in time has it ever been that a northerner will pick the side of a southerner, the feelings of a southerner over that of a northerner. And to round up this opening part of the preamble, we also see just a few days ago a social media personality, very controversial, for good and bad. His court was passing. He recently declared his support for a northern presidential candidate, Atiku. And social media was awash with shock. And a lot of nationalists were not shocked by that because it is not uncommon for a northerner to support a northerner. It is not uncommon. But it is very uncommon to a southerner to see a northerner supporting a northerner. And it is in that clash of ideology, that fabric of innocence that a lot of southerners have, that continues to reinforce the need for us to have nationalism conversations, ethnic nationality conversations, to remind ourselves who we are and why some people are more inclined to behave in the way they behave, and whether these attributes are essentially okay for us to build a nation, or whether it is time for us to build several nations within that nation. And that is exactly where we'll be having the conversation going forward. So I want to take a few minutes just for us to check if there are any questions or any contributions for maybe the better 3 to 5 minutes, and then we can go back to our conversation. So I think I will stop now for me. Thank you.
Wow, no, that was a very insightful opening there, Mr. Dapo. Well, thank you so much. If I get you correctly, Mr. Dapo, so what you said in the opening was that poor leadership is oftentimes vaguely and superficially analyzed as the cornerstone of our problem. And I'm going to add that problem is even more prevalent in southern part of Nigeria and also maybe the Middle Belt. Very, very vaguely, people would say that leadership is our problem. And what that does is that it easily just shuts your mind from thinking thoroughly and deeply about other possibilities. And that is the position, that is the situation where they would rather have us. They suggest a problem, and they also suggest the solution to that problem in the same breath. And they tell you leadership is your problem, and if you get leadership right, then you get everything else right. Then in the system, in the process that they have established, they would set up an electoral process, and they would expect you to use that system, that process, to elect credible, visionary, and capable leaders that are capable of changing the course of the nation. And this is exactly what we've practiced since 1960s till now. And of course, we all agree that when some part of the country were not having it their way, as a result of the structure that we had going into the new nation or the new country called Nigeria, then they started to use their military influence to manipulate the system. And when they've gotten to a point when they've used that military power that they've got, that military influence, to the point that they've used it to establish the constitutional framework through which the Nigerian state must be governed. Not until then, they did not say, okay, we understand your problem, we hear your cries, let's go at it, let's go have the democracy that you all are crying and craving and going crazy to have. after all our activists, some of them dead during those military eras, some of our political activists exiled. And isn't it interesting that those political activists of those days, the victims of the system of those days, of those eras of military dictatorship, they would be back in that system established, created, formulated by the military guys. And they will go into that entrapment. And before you know it, they are as corrupt as the devil himself. So, leadership, or poor leadership, as the case might be, that has been proposed, that has been suggested, that has been hinted to be the source, the foundation, the cornerstone of our problem, of our predicament. And the process through which you are supposed to now choose good leaders, in quote, that would give you power, that would give you good roads, that would give you good healthcare system, that would give you good educational system, that would give you the future, the lifestyle that you deserve, the dignity, the human dignity that you deserve as an individual. It's now hinged on that political system. It's now hinged on that electoral system that is fraudulent. So how can you now choose good leadership? How can you elect good leadership given the Nigeria historical antecedents? How? And that is why we are now in a state today where people are so confused. Our people are so confused because for far too long, the politicians, the masterminds of this fraud called a country, they have suggested and they have embedded in our subconscious the false narrative of leadership being the bedrock of our problem. And they have also proposed a solution for you. If you want to change, and that's why when we talked, you will engage some people about the need for self-determination of the Yoruba people or the Igbo people or the Ijaw people, and they will tell you, you must go participate in that process. And you tell them, but this process has got this fraudulent constitution that is not the desire and the wish of the people. So how, therefore, can we use that constitution? How, therefore, can we use that legal framework? How can we use the electoral system to put in positions of power and authority for the purpose of giving us the lifestyle that we demand, that we deserve as a people? How can we now expect that it is that same process that will give you that result? It's garbage in, garbage out. Don't forget. It is what you put into the process that you will get out of the process. But they want us to ignore what we are putting in. They want us to ignore the process happening in the midpoint. But on the other hand, they want an outcome. They know there would never be a good outcome, but they want you to see that the only possibility that you have is to be involved in that process, going in there, and whatever it is that takes place in between, where you do not see, where you do not have the visibility. But You have a constant expectation. And what is that expectation? If only I can go out there and cast my vote, then there will be good leader. I will have good governor in my state. I would have great chairman in my local government. In fact, my councillors, and some people will tell you, okay, forget about Abuja, forget about your state capital, but go and take care of your ward, of your local government. That's what they tell us. So if I'm going to my local government with the intention to go make a change, so which political platform? PDP, APC, Labour Party? So go get involved, go participate in the political process. But we know the outcome. How did we know these outcomes? Because we've been there before. We have been at this exact spot in the past on several occasions. So because there is now the new excitement in town about this candidate, and ever since in the political history of Nigeria, there has always been that candidate that is exceptional, that one exceptional in quote, not exceptional because they have credibility or they have antecedents, but remarkable because they are lesser evil. And for some reasons, it's like, our brains are not even there existing, on our heads. Because we must, because that is the condition that they are giving us. We must embrace one of these lesser evils. And all of us will start to run around like headless chickens, campaigning and advocating for that lesser evil. The bad news is that whoever becomes that president, whoever becomes that state governor, would have to operate under this fraudulent system, would have to operate under this fraudulent process called constitution. So why then should we not have any other conversations than conversations around, let us go out there and just cast our votes? Cast your ballot and expect changes. In fact, some candidates will tell you, cast your vote. Stay there. Make sure that you stay there. Make sure that make sure that you are standing right there with the INEC officials to make sure that they count your votes in your presence. I would just laugh. Why would you cast your ballot and wait until your votes are counted? They are giving us hints over hints over hints. But we don't get it. Just because we cannot be critical, just because we cannot ask questions. Why should I cast my ballot and still wait there? Where does that happen? All over the world. In fact, some candidates will tell you that you should protect your vote. What a joke. Stand there, cast your vote, observe, protect your vote, they would say. Why should you protect your vote? Why? Because you're a policeman? So, candidates will be home on whatever it is that they take. But you should be out there. So why won't they tell you to go and defend your vote? Because they have given you the peanuts. 2,000 naira, 5,000 naira. You must work for that payment that you have gotten, for that bribe. for that 2,000, 1,000 naira, for that 500 naira. You must work. And to some other gullible people who probably, out of sheer ignorance, these sets of people, they don't really need your 5,000 naira or whatever amount that you've got to offer them. But because they really don't know any better. And that is why it is really, really important that we continue to educate our people, especially our younger people. It is not in your place. It is not in your place to be going crazy for any politician. It is actually against you. All this canvassing, I don't see in the country that I live, for example, I don't see citizens going around campaigning for candidates. No. I've never had my neighbors knock on my door to promote candidates. No. But guess what? I've had politicians themselves, people running for offices. Some would set up appointments. They would seek to know when it is most convenient for you. And they would come. And if you don't open your door, it is within your right not to. But if you are willing to learn and listen to them, if their programs interest you, you can invite them in and you can have conversations. And I remember a case very, very clearly of a rep that came, and I was going to offer him coffee or water, and he just brought out his bottle of water that he carries around everywhere he goes. No convoys, nothing. And you can have conversations. If I vote for you, then what do I get? What do our constituency, what do we get for supporting you? What programs do you have for us? There's been a pothole behind my house for a few years. Private road. Can you see to it that somebody, fixes it? You have those conversations during the winters. It takes a longer time for people to come and plow the snow from my driveway. What can we do to it? You can have these conversations that human beings have. And if I'm going to vote for him, I don't even need to go tell anybody else to go vote for him, because they have the right to vote for whoever they feel can represent their interest. I digress. Focusing on Nigeria and the electoral system, can we have the solution that we desire? And what are these solutions that we desire? As far as Nigeria is concerned today, the life of individuals is worth nothing. And we are saying, as a product of our experiences in the Nigerian contraption, we are saying that what is human, what is reasonable, at the minimum, is to have our space, our own independent state, not for any other reason, but for the purpose of to protect lives and properties of our people. And why is it so that this cannot be guaranteed in the Nigerian state? Then we need to go visit the Constitution of Nigeria. The infamous executive list. Because it is in that executive list that you have items such as security. So if I'm going to be living in Ikale or Idori, if I'm going to be living in Ilaro, in Yewa, if I'm going to be living in Oshogbo, in Osun State, if I'm going to be living in Ika, if I'm living in Ibadan, in Bere, if I'm going to be living in Ikorodu, wherever it is in Yoruba land that I want to have as my place of residency, I must be guaranteed safety and security, not just for myself, but for my household. Not just for my household alone, but for my properties, whatever those properties are. Whether it is my farmland, whether it is my car, whatever it is, I must be able to guarantee safety and security. And we as Yoruba people, we have gotten to that point, to that threshold where we have recognized that the assurances of our securities and safeties cannot be placed in the remote Abuja, because it defies all logics. It defies all logics that somebody that I don't know, somebody that does not speak my language, somebody that does not speak Yoruba, somebody that does not understand Yoruba, somebody that does not understand the plight of the Yoruba people should not be in charge of my safety and security. And even worse still, somebody that is against my very existence, someone that would rather have me dead, should not be in charge of my security and well-being. We are not asking for too much. Not too much. Mr. D. Eguono, Mr. Dakosowo, I'm going to yield the mic back to you. I know you've got a robust presentation to share with us. Let's get some of that, and we can continue to have these conversations. Thank you so much, Mr. Dapo. I'm going to yield the mic to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. So, one of the things that the lecture, today's discussion, seeks to achieve is to talk about the main prisons upon which we are fractured as a country. And we can then discuss the communal problems that connects all of us. And we can also seek to understand why constitutional reform conversations shouldn't be alien to the educated peoples of Nigeria, you know. And I'm going to use things that you already can see and touch in the country. Also, we're going to talk about history, economic history of the country. We're going to compare Europe, Africa. You know, it's a detailed conversation, and it is my expectation that very quickly that at least next time when somebody tells you, "Oh, I'm not really interested in elections," or what I really want us to focus on is to have a way as ethnic nations in Nigeria, whether you are an Igbo nationalist or Yoruba nationalist, an Hausa nationalist, or Ijaw nationalist, or a Birom nationalist, and Edo nationalist, Benin. You know, whatever your nationality is as a nation, that you'll be more interested in how we can solve our communal problems. You know, the one that is common to all of us, selfishly, you know, what is in the best interest of the Yoruba man, since I'm Yoruba? And how can we then use that to mold a cohesive federation, because it is the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's an insinuation that we're supposed to be a federation. Now, let's go back to the very beginning. The first question to ask yourself is, what is a federation? And we're starting from this point on. Just ask yourself, when they say Federal Republic of Nigeria, the word federal, what does it mean to you? What is it supposed to mean to you? Because this is not an accident. When our founding fathers negotiated for freedom from the colonialists, the British contraption that we found ourselves in, we negotiated on the principle of federalism, a federation of existing nations. And the purpose of the negotiation at that time was because we had realized for very long that the word Nigeria, it didn't mean anything to anybody. It meant something to Flora Shaw, who is very proud of having named a whole country. You know, we as parents, we say we're proud to have named our children. We buy a car and we give the car a name. You build a property, you give the property a name. You buy some real estate, you build a large space of land. You can call it Lekki Gardens, you can call it, you can call it Oniru Hills, you can call it whatever you like. But the white man is very proud to not just name countries, but name people as well. So they came to a space, they found some people coexisting in different nations, and they came together and they gave them a name, and the name stuck. And the grandchildren of these people are fighting, for that name. So if you remember, Awolowo said in 1960s, he said that the name Nigeria, it doesn't mean anything to anybody, not to the northern nationalists, to the eastern nationalists, to the southern nationalists, or to the Yoruba nationalists. It means nothing to us. It's just an expression, a geographical meaning to the people that live in Nigeria. There's no Nigerian food as there is, there's no Nigerian dish, there's no Nigerian language, there's no Nigerian culture, right? But what it is that we are the Nigerian people who live in Nigeria. Even the English is not our mother tongue. English is the language of the Saxons. So, essentially, what is a federation? A federation is a group of organizations and states that have united to form a large organization. And I know it's very silly for me to define federation, but there are so many of our people, our youth, our vision, the tomorrow, you see them, they get so flustered, irritated when you talk about ethnic nationalism in Nigeria. When they see, there's something called the Indigenous people of Biafra. People, even that have never had contact with one person from that ethnic nation, they just have this bias, this mentality that once you identify as an indigenous person of that country, that you are, like Saddam Hussein, like you have suicide belts in your bombs and everything. Or when you say Yoruba Nation, you want to kill somebody. That's not who we are. Yoruba nationalism essentially talks about the people who are proud Yoruba nationalists. One thing that shocks me, to a Southerner, you will never question the Fulani man's proud identity and heritage. But if you see a Yoruba man that is very proud, very Yoruba first, I think Yoruba first, I speak Yoruba first, I'm a Yoruba nationalist, you immediately have this bias that this person is a tribalist. But when you see an Hausa Fulani that is Fulani, but has married into the Hausa family, and he says, I am Hausa Fulani, you don't call him a tribalist, trying to say that, it should be Hausa, not Hausa Fulani. You don't judge him. But when you say a Yoruba or a Southerner from anywhere, you judge them. Why? A video came viral recently where I saw one of those Niger Delta advocates. Very, very controversial personality, Asari Dokubo. And he was having these weapons on his body and he was going for a function. Southerners generally that were in my general conversational platforms, they were irritated. They were like, why will you do this? Are we in war? This, that. You're a non-state actor. Why should you be carrying military grade weapons and this and that? I said, to you, it is strange because of your westernization, because of your Western ideology. To some other people, that is just, somebody that is going to be an emir tomorrow. Because of our fabric of who we are. So a federation is a unity of already coexisting ethnic nations. It is a merger between people that agree to have their several states come into a coalition, like a company. It's like we're united on the basis of our different ethnic nations come together to form a bigger nation. That is what Nigeria is. So at the very foundation of it, I'm proudly Yoruba first. The Yorubas have their territory. We've existed. I mean, we are currently on Etin's skull fragment that is being reconstituted, that a Yoruba person's skull, by DNA testing, 4,000 years old. As in, you can imagine, we've existed long before Flora Shaw was given birth to, grown to be an adult, then came to become somebody's girlfriend in Port Harcourt, and then named a colonial territory of the Royal Niger Company. We were existing long before that. So there was the Igbo nation, the Ijaw nation, the Birom nation, the Jukun people. Their democracy, you would not believe it in their it's not the Thief people. Their democracy was studied by the British when they came, as to how you can operate quasi-loose federalism, where there's constantly rotating leadership. That is how long these peoples have existed. Empires, long before we came in contact with the British. This is like the European Union. Do you ever see a German saying is Europe first? Or you meet somebody who is from France, or a French citizen, a French person, and he identifies as European or Lithuanian or Dutch. I mean, he is who he is. He's French. It doesn't stop him from being part of the Union of Europe. But he's French. He's Dutch. He's from Slovakia. Indonesia. I mean, people are from different parts of the world, but nobody identified as, as the Union name. You cannot meet a white man from the United Kingdom. You ask him where is he from, you say, I'm UK. I mean, if you say a black man that just migrated and got passport, he will be forming UK. But if you ask them, they will tell you, I'm Scottish. Even from their accent, Alex Ferguson, you will know, I am not an Irish. I'm Irish. I'm English. They are all different, but they are in a union that is even working, the United Kingdom. Nigeria is a federation of ethnic nations. And Canada is an example of a federation of provinces and territories. The United States is an excellent example of a federation. Different ethnic nations or states make up the United States. Before 1991, the USSR was a collection of Russia Federation countries. Today we have Russia territory, Georgia territory, Ukraine territory. But before, they were a federation, which means they come together to form USSR. Same thing in the Spanish Federation, United Kingdom, all federations. But a federation often emerges when there's an initial agreement between several states. It's not that we were just everybody together. We were usually separate states, and we still are separate states. If you go to a certain part of the country, if you're a woman, it is expected of you to dress a certain way. You can come to the core part of the southern part of the country, go to our market, see the way the women dress. Some, I want to say less than modest dressing and all that. You can't do that in certain parts of the country. You know it, because we are different, and they tell you all the time. A federation is a form of government that is divided, the sovereign power is divided between the central authority and the ethnic nations or constituent regions. And this is what we formed at independence. That's why we became a federation. Even long before independence, as far back as the Macpherson constitutions and all of that. In 1952, we were already Western region, Eastern region, Northern region. We're separate people. We're already governing ourselves as individual nations. And by the time we were getting to the 60s, it was almost 6 clear and distinct nations. I mean, there was the South, or what you currently have as a structure of the South, which was the Midwestern region. There was the Western region, there was the Eastern region, there was the Northern region, and there was even a conversation about having a North Central region at that time already to separate the largely Christian speaking Middle Northern states from the core Muslim Sharia North. I mean, this was already as far back as the 60s. So what you now have is that different constitutions from 1963 downwards, it has the strength of democracy or the watering down of ethnic nationalism up onto a point where we can't even have a conversation for constitutional reform without sounding like we're trying to destroy something that does not exist. The question is, the issue of referendum today that most of the people that are asking for it are asking for. If I'm part of an ethnic nation, I'm part of a group of companies, and I'm frustrated by the poor performance of the company, and I want to pull out my assets and liabilities out of the company, why should I request for a board meeting to have that conversation to pull out my shares, my investment from the company? Why should it become something that is considered, you need to kill me for having that conversation? Do you need to militarize me for asking? What I have said, does it threaten your own shares in the company? So the issue of referendum has become all more important, especially recent agitation in the East and the West, and the need to vote to determine the continuous existence of Nigeria as an entity is constantly being brought up. Before 1966, we existed as separate federating units, a weak center. Now we've been centralized. Everybody goes to the center. Everything starts from the center. I mean, even as basic as security. We've seen state governors having to, create, almost ethnic national police outfits and essentially send them to go fight gun wielding, AK-47 carrying, submachine gun carrying, rocket propel carrying militias coming from Mauritania, Niger, Chad, down into the core north and terrorizing all the way to every part of the country. We've seen people form security outfits and then they weaponize them with Dane guns that were produced in the early 1700s, guns that you can't shoot a deer with. You want to go with those type of weapons against people that are carrying rocket-propelled assault rifles that even have cameras, the one that broke into the Abuja prison, you saw how sophisticated the weaponry were. So you have the curious case of Amotekun. I think there's one called the Bedike. I mean, it's not really a problem in the Niger Delta because despite the de-radicalization and the weaponization conversion that they've done, the militancy part of the Niger Delta is still very visible, which means that, we saw what Asari Dokubo was trying to tell the federal government. So it is very frustrating that question of returning back to the 1963 Constitution is something that it is so difficult for people to understand. Most of the amendments that must be approved by 2/3 of the State Assembly, as well as assented by a president. So if 2/3 of the company say they don't want to have referendum or constitutional reform, that means we just continue going and going like that. You are essentially not respecting the ethnic nations that came into Nigeria because everybody came under the strength of their own ethnic nationality. So you cannot today now say, I don't want to go, you don't want to go, so you cannot go. I don't want to go, but you want to go, so you cannot go. It doesn't work. That's not the unity that you're trying to force. And since 1963, there have been 3 main prisms upon which you can examine Nigeria's problems. It's like a triangle. There is a base to the triangle, but there is a triangle. And no matter which side of the scale tilts the triangle to the left or to the right, it constantly means that the problem constitution, it sinks back into the foundation because the 3 edges, they continue to have a strong pull. And those are the 3 main problems. The first problem is the security problems. Second problem is the economic problems. And the third problem is the social cultural diversity problems of forming a multi-ethnic nation like Nigeria. So it is beyond Peter Obi or Bola Ahmed Tinubu or Atiku. It's essentially a foundation that is deeply fragile and it is rooted in social cultural diverse multi-ethnic problems that they require an honest conversation between everybody about what is in the best interest of the country. Because I don't think that our economic problems are insurmountable. We've seen in the past brilliant economic finance ministers, coordinating ministers of the economy. We've seen them in the past. I mean, in 1999, there was a Southern president, let's ignore where he comes from, and he had a Southern economic management team or one or two people there, and they looked at our debt figures. It was almost into 30 billion US dollars, and they said we cannot build a productive economy. We need to pay off some of our debt. They came up with debt cancellation plan. They laid down some money, and they essentially reduced that debt to almost $2 billion. Where are we today with our debt? We've gone back. We've gone back. We've borrowed more and more and more. And today, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's hideous what our debt figures are. When we talk about it, people often get flustered. They said, oh, we need leadership. No, the problem has never been leadership. The problem has always been in the structure. Because irrespective of the personality that leads, you can have, let's assume we have purely 8 years between North and South. You can have 8 years of prosperity, 8 years of recession, 8 years of prosperity, 8 years of recession. You're essentially just going to stay the same. No progress. So for you to build a sustainable progressive nation, you have to have consistent years of structured growth. And for you to have structured growth, you need to be speaking as one people, one voice, one ideology politically, one ideology in terms of what we want to achieve, in terms of, how we want to tax our people, how we want to set up the structure of the country, whether it's progressive, whether it is social, whether it's capitalist. It's essentially something that it is in who we are as a people. Let's talk about our economic problems very quickly. We already know that we have inflation and monetary policy problems. Inflation is the one you can see and touch. I mean, there was a time with 2,000 naira, you could buy a crate of egg and a kilo of chicken and perhaps half a kilo of kote or a kilo of kote fish. Even as a humble, not too high earning person, you could at least afford to feed your family. Today, that same money cannot buy a crate of egg. I mean, a crate of egg in most parts is about 2,000 naira. So what does that tell you? It tells you that we have consistently devalued our currency and we have been on the wrong side of inflation, and it has consistently affected us as a people. People say money doesn't have value, but actually it does have value. It stays pretty consistent if you have strong economic policies and economic principles. But if you're like somebody accused the CBN governor recently of doing, which is just printing money to finance the economy, being indebted to yourself, so to speak, and creating economic, manipulations that the people pay for, you end up with kind of inflation and monetary policy problems that you're having today. I mean, we have a very big problem in terms of import and exports. We import more than we should. We export only what people call refined or raw materials, and we import finished products. And does it make sense that a country like Europe depends on Africa, or a nation or a coalition like the European nation depends on Africa for 60% of its raw materials, but then depends on Africa for 60% of sales of its finished product. So it's essentially designed to take resources from us as Black people, as Africans, refine it and sell it back to us, whereas we perpetually remain poor because we pay almost 4 times the cost of what we sold in the first place. So it is designed to perpetuate poverty. If you cannot overcome your import-export problems, we have revenue generation problems. I know the Obi campaign and the Tinubu campaign, they love this particular touch point because some see it as a strength of the politician from the Southwest. Some see it as a weakness for the politician in the Southeast. But at the end of the day, it is all over the country that we have revenue generation problems, not just in the South. Let's talk about it in detail, shall we? Between January and August 2021, there was a publication about the value-added tax that was generated across all the countries, all the states in the country. In Sokoto, it was approximately 5 billion. In Kebbi, it was 1 billion. In Zamfara, it was 598 million. In Katsina, 4 billion. Kano, 25 billion. Jigawa, 3 billion. Yobe, 9 billion. Borno, 3 billion. Kaduna, 18 billion. Niger, 4 billion. And the list goes on. I'm reading it out so that those people that fact check, like they always do on social media these days, will know that we're not pulling out figures from the air. Those figures actually do exist. And across the core north, the middle belt, the southeast, the south-south, and Yoruba Nation, you realize that the revenue generation was 51, 45, 527, 23, and 136 in that sequence. So core north, middle belt, Yoruba Nation, southeast, and south-south. A particular region generated 67% of the VAT revenue. But when it came to federal allocation, this is where the problem starts. Federal allocation for the same period, 22% of the federal allocation was given to the region that generated 6% of VAT. The middle belt that generated total approximately 45 billion was given 205 billion. A part of the country that generated 67% of the VAT revenue, 527 billion, was only allocated 316 billion, which is about 30%. So I put 67% of the flour on the table, and then you gave me back just 30% of the cake. Another person, 23 billion, got 110 billion, and of course, somebody generated about 136 billion, got about 173 billion. So these are revenue generation problems. You cannot have population to vote, but not have population to generate VAT. So therefore, we will be keeping the VAT we generate in our state. Those were the words of Yesin Wike when the OVAT debacle became public news. But is it not fair to say that if I generate 20% of the revenue in a 5-man contribution, then I should be entitled to at least 20% of the shares in a 5-man contribution? But if I generate 67% of the revenue and I only get 30% back put into me for the 60% I put out, does that not put together problem as to why my people should pay tax? I mean, it's hilarious. Recently, somebody said that the Lagos State NURTW chapter generated approximately 120 billion in revenue in a single year. You know what makes it interesting is that it will take about almost 8 or 9 states or couple of states to put together as states to generate that much revenue. That's problems. That means that some people who have the same population don't tax their citizenry, while some people who have the same population overtax their citizenry. So it doesn't make for effective nation building. And across Africa, Nigeria has revenue to GDP of 6%, which is startling worse because some other countries 15%, 24%, and 36%. Talking about Egypt, South Africa, even Algeria. So what this tells you is that we have revenue generation problems in our country. Another shocking problem we seem to not know we have, but we do have, is in foreign direct investment. In 2020, we seem to have attracted just about $2.24 billion. Other country, Egypt, was able to attract $5.9 billion in foreign direct investment. What is the most shocking part of this is that Egypt has just about 100 million in population. Nigeria has about 200 million in population. But people were not investing. Diaspora influence and diaspora remittances is another funny one. On one hand, the Nigerian government is very quick to beg Nigerians in diaspora to send money back home because that accounts for sometimes as much as 50% of the revenue that the country gets in dollars. As a matter of fact, the oil revenue and for 5 years, the last 5 years, and the diaspora remittances for the last 5 years are almost the same, about $56 billion to $60 billion. You can go and check. But what makes it curious is that the moment Nigerians in diaspora try to influence policy governance, they are shut down. At social media, you see government-paid handles and influencers telling Nigerians in diaspora that just because you have found safe haven abroad, don't burn down Nigeria. My people are asking, if I'm telling you people that we should change the way we are running this thing so that it can be better, you are telling me to shut up. Tomorrow you will say that if I send $100 home, you will give me 5 naira. Am I in Nigeria to spend the naira that you're giving me when I send the dollars? But yet you come to me, you want to do infrastructure bond, you come to me, you want to do loans. Most of you know that your CBN or most of your foreign loans, go and check it, you see diaspora bonds and stuff like that. They are essentially loans owed to Nigerians in diaspora, taken on behalf of Nigeria as a country. But you don't want them to have any influence. The moment Nigerians in diaspora talk about Yoruba Nation, Biafra Nation, you shut them down. You want to arrest them, say they are terrorists, they are this, they are that. Go and check. Majority of those campaigning for Igbo Nation today, they don't have their names or their profile. They are being hounded, harassed, branded as terrorists. They can't even have an opinion or a voice on something that concerns them. But on the other hand, when you finish telling them, do you know that Nigeria is one of the countries with highest diaspora remittances that does not recognize diaspora voting or diaspora influences in policy? Nothing. Even in Egypt, where their diaspora remittances are not as much as ours, the Egyptians are allowed to vote. Do you understand that Egyptians in diaspora can go to the embassy on election day and influence? In fact, most of the constitutional reforms that galvanize Egypt to a country of emulation for dear old Nigeria today comes from the influences of constitutional reform championed by Egyptians in diaspora. Go and read up on it. But the moment Nigerians in diaspora have any sort of opinion, you shut them down. I'll talk about our foreign and domestic debt problem. I think that at this stage, anybody that does not know about Nigeria's debt problem, just know this and know peace. In the first quarter of this year, a publication came out from the Ministry of Finance that said that 116% of our revenue went to debt servicing. Just to put this in context, this is the equivalent of somebody who spent 3 months and his total revenue was 100 naira. But in that 3 months, the total money he owed to creditors was 116 naira. Because sometimes a lot of economists get away with taking very simple ideologies and putting them into complex narratives so that you lose the plot. Mostly people who are being paid by government so that nobody knows what is going on. But it's important to know, it's not sustainable. When they talk about debt, they are very quick to compare Nigeria with developed countries. But compare Nigeria, don't compare, tangerine and watermelon. Compare apples to apples. Compare those who are living in our economic realities, in our similar GDPs, in our similar GDP per capita, and then compare their debt servicing. And then you have a more clearer picture. But it is one of the talents to demystify the issues that we face as a people, that a lot of Nigerian pseudo-economists are very quick to say, oh, the debt is not that bad. I mean, in South Africa, they are owing this. In Egypt, they are owing this. Maybe you should ask them, what is the equivalent of South Africa's revenue to their debt? So that you will know, if me, as a person, let's assume for the purpose of this conversation, I earn 100 naira a year. If I go and borrow 90 naira, that means Every year, I mean, I owe the equivalent of 90% of my annual revenue, but I only borrowed 90 naira. On the other hand, if Dangote, who earns, for the purpose of just this conversation, 1,000,000 naira a year, if he borrows 900,000 or 500,000, and then somebody is telling me that because Dangote borrowed 500,000 and me I borrowed 90 naira, that I should go ahead and borrow as much as 200,000, I would not still have borrowed up to Dangote. Shouldn't you tell the person that you don't like me, you hate me? Because you cannot compare countries that have a bigger revenue to their debt than Nigeria, who is spending more than it earns to service debt. It is just crazy. But they will be arguing and shouting because they are paid influencers and government handles. That's people who know that there is a problem, but because this is the brief, they will not listen to reason, no matter what you tell them. It is false equivalency and it is sheer stupidity to compare Nigeria's debt to other countries who have a better debt servicing. Some countries have more debt than us, but they're only using about 70% of their revenue to service debt. Some are using 86%, some are using even 40% in South Africa. But here you are using 116%, and you don't see it as a problem. Is it until you go
Thank you so much, everyone that have joined us. Have a very good afternoon. I finished with it. Come and take this one.